All right, we're going to start off by downloading the card template PDF. We'll click on the three dots in the upper right hand corner, go to open in new window, and we will click on the download button and open this in Illustrator. We're going to go into Illustrator, I'm going to do open, and then I'm going to open up that PDF. And we'll click OK. Now the template is just to help you kind of visualize what your card is going to look like. The front of the card is on the right side, the left side is your name. You can change the typeface and all of that. We are going to eventually delete this fold line. It's just kind of a nice visual. One thing to keep in mind is that these edges here will have a little bit of bleed, meaning you want to leave a little bit of space on the edge. You can create a design that goes all the way from edge to edge, but you want to make sure that you don't put any really important stuff like text or images that you want to be visible right on the edge. All right. I'm going to go ahead and just delete the front of card. So I click on that and press delete on my keyboard. I don't really need to worry about that right now. And let's first talk about creating a brush. So we're going to design a brush for Illustrator here, and I'm just going to click on my brush tool here and open up brushes. And I'm just going to create a new brush because I'm going to basically use a brush, just a basic one, to make a design that then I'm going to turn into a brush, if that makes sense. I'm going to just collapse these down here if it'll let me. There we go. Okay. All right, so I got my brush selected. I should be able to draw, as long as I have my properties showing up here too. Whoops, right down there. Okay. I just drew a line here, but it's white. So I'm going to change that to black. We'll delete that. Okay, whoops. Delete. There we go. Okay. So this is just going to be an example. This is not going to be my best work ever. I'm just going to do a quick little snowflake design, and I can zoom in on this as I'm working on it. Just kind of off to the side here. Actually, let's do just kind of a quick design. So you do have to do a custom brush for this assignment, and you can do this with the brush tool or even the pen tool, or basically any of the tools you're allowed to use. I don't know if I like that. We'll go back. Let's do maybe a line going this way. There we go. Okay. And you've already looked at making custom brushes, so I'm not too worried about that right now. Let me also just do some quick ellipses here for the ends. So I'm not going to spend too much time going over that. Let's, whoops, fill that with black. It'll let me move it. We'll just do something like that. Again, not my best snowflake ever, but you get the idea. I should have made it more symmetrical, but that's all right. Okay. Now I'm going to highlight that, and then we're going to go to Window Brushes again. Here we go. We're going to click on the little plus sign, the new brush, and then from here I'm going to just do Art Brush for now. We'll click OK. You can play around with color right here, so if you want to mess around with the color, you're allowed to do that. So, or play around with hue shift or whatever. Let's click OK. All right, and now I'm going to click out of this and we're going to test it out with my brush tool. So I'm going to click on my custom brush. If I click and drag, you can see I have made my brush. And depending on the length that I've created, it kind of skews it or doesn't skew it. Here we go. So you can see I can change it then with the stroke. And that's my basic pattern. Now, if I wanted this to repeat and I wanted that brush, I'm going to go back here, Control Z, and I wanted it to be more like a pattern brush, I can highlight that again, go into your brushes, do the plus sign, and then we'll do pattern brush. Again, you can play around with the colors. We can do hue shifts, so you can change the colors. We'll click, actually I'm going to scale this down a little bit so you can see it smaller. So this is what it would look like if I created like a border. Whoops, hang on, grab your correct brush, click and drag, and there I have my beautiful border, and I should be able to change the color that way. So I could do like a circle border or a border on the whole thing. So let's just stick with that one for now. Again, you can always do other stuff. I'm going to delete that original design and just zoom back out so you can kind of get a sense of what I'm expecting. I'm going to exit out of this and we'll move you down. Okay. So let's grab that brush again. So this bottom one. And let's start, we'll just keep it black for now, but we can always change that later on. So let's go in and draw a border, and we're just going to start with the front cover. Something kind of like that. And we can always adjust it if we need to. So the beauty of that is we can resize, we can recolor over here if you want to change the color. See, I can change that. It's a really easy thing. I think instead of doing that, actually, I'm going to do a circle. I like that better. If I can do an okay circle, that's fine, whatever. And let's change that maybe to green. There we go. Okay, now if you remember correctly, in Illustrator, backgrounds are transparent. So like right now, this is nothing really. When it's saved as a PDF, it'll be white, but we probably want to add some color to that. So in order to add color, we're not going to fill bucket it or anything. We're going to use the shape tool. So I'm going to right click on this. We're going to go to rectangle, and I'm going to pull up my layers here just so I can keep track of them. You can see my other layers there. And I'm going to click and drag from one corner to the other. And I'm going to fill that with a color so we can actually see it. Let's just fill it with like a dark red. And then I'm going to turn that stroke off because we don't need an outline on that box. This is just my background. Now I can right click on that and say arrange send to back. And now I should be able to have that, you know, it's kind of my background. If it doesn't work when you do send to back, you might just have to drag that layer below some of your other layers. So just a heads up about that. If you're working on different layers, you'll have to drag that layer below. Otherwise it won't work. And I'm going to change this actually to white now, just because that seems to make more sense for snowflakes. Here we go. Oh, I like that. Okay. Now you are allowed to use Pixabay, so I'm just going to open up Pixabay here. We'll find some images that might work. Again, this is a very quick demonstration. I didn't want to spend a lot of time going over all this and taking up all your time just by me doing this demonstration. But when we have something like this, I generally will stick with illustrations or vectors, and a reminder that you are expected to remix or adapt the images you find. Ignore this top row because that's just the sponsored images. So scroll down, and adapt or remixing means you take whatever you download and you're going to change it up. So you're going to do something to mix it up. One thing might be like cutting something out or changing colors. I might actually use this as an example for cutting something out. I'm going to download that, and then I can go into Adobe Illustrator and we'll do File, Place. And then I can place it where I want it. I can resize. You're welcome to trace as well. Something like that. Oops. Okay. Now, something to keep in mind too is now that I'm trying to cut this out, Illustrator isn't really the best place for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do File, Save As. We're going to save this as an AI file if it'll let me. There we go. And I'm going to open this in Photoshop now. So we'll move over to Photoshop and I'll show you some uses of Photoshop here that are going to be beneficial. So again, Photoshop is really for photo editing, editing artwork, creating digital paintings, any kind of photo manipulation. So you might bounce back and forth, or you might just stay in Illustrator, or you might just stay in Photoshop. And it doesn't really matter which one you use because it works in both. All right, so I'm going to open this up. Takes a minute sometimes, especially when you have both programs open and my laptop can only handle so much. Come on. You don't need to worry about crediting any of the images on here. As long as you found them on Pixabay, that shouldn't be a problem. All right, we're going to go to open. We're going to open up that AI file. Looks good. We'll click OK. Here we go. Oh, and I forgot. We need to, you know what, before we do that, my bad. Save it without the image. That would be helpful. Okay, let's try that again. File, open. There we go. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to go into File, Place Embedded. I'm going to place that image that I want to edit. So I want to cut out this snowman to begin with, so I just want to get rid of that background. So that's one way to remix and adapt. I'm going to use my magic eraser, and of course it's going to ask me to rasterize, so I'll click OK. If you need to rasterize manually, you'll just right click and choose Rasterize Layer. Nice, there we go. So now he's nice and cut out. Maybe I'll put him in the middle ring here. Here we go. And I think for my message, I'll just say like, let it snow, let it snow. I am also going to erase this shadow that's down here. It just looks kind of awkward. So let's go ahead and erase that, making sure you're on the right layer because it definitely makes a difference in Photoshop. I might even just magic erase that. Let's try that. There we go. Awesome. Magic eraser is our friend. Maybe if I want to remix it even more, I could change colors, or maybe I want to like reverse it. So I can go into Edit, Transform, Flip Horizontal. So that's one way you can kind of remix. You can rotate, you can flip things. I'll zoom back out so you can see. I'll just say File, Save for now. There we go. Now, one thing, since I am in Photoshop now, I have this line and that text there, but I can just delete that on my own. I'm going to keep that line there until the very end just to kind of visually remind myself, but I am going to get rid of my name. So let's grab the color here that I want, and we're just going to cover that up. Color away. It's not on a new layer, it's just on the same one. All right, and then I'm going to go into my type tool, and I'm going to create some type. I'm just going to start with this one, and I'll say, oops, make sure it's the right color. Do white. Designed by Daily Quam, which is my name. You can center it, play around with the typeface here. I'm going to walk you through downloading typefaces again as well. So let's go into dafont.com. I'm going to try and find a typeface. We'll just stick with this one right now. I'll click on download. And then once again, this is the part that everybody forgets. You're going to click on that zip file in your downloads. So you might have to click on the downloads or your file folder down here. Click on that. Double click on the open type file and then click install. Notice how the bigger sizes it doesn't work. So just a heads up on the preview there. These are just the symbols, so I'm not so worried about that. Now that it's installed, I can go in, oops, double check what it was called. It was called Last Christmas. Grab my type tool here, make sure that that's highlighted. Now I can go in and look for the L's. As long as it installed correctly, it should work. Here it is. Nice. There we go. Now you do get bonus points if you actually add your physical signature. So if you use the drawing tablet, you can then use the brush tool to create the signature. Personally, I like that better in Illustrator to do that. So if you move into Illustrator and you want to use the brush tool, it just kind of makes it look nicer. But that looks fine to me. Now it's kind of plain, so I definitely need to add some more. I'm going to add the Let It Snow, and I'm going to repeat that. We'll do Let It Snow, Let It Snow, Let It Snow. Something like that. Again, being aware that we're not putting important things right on the edge, and you have to remember that this is a fold line, so you don't want to put it right on the line either. You want some nice balance. We're thinking about layout. Right now I have a very symmetrical design with a lot of white space, so I could really fill in some of those areas. I'm going to do Control C, Control V. Maybe this one. I might even play with the placement, let it kind of touch like that. I kind of like that. Do Control V again, so I'm just doing Control C, Control V, putting those on separate layers. So proximity wise, I think this is okay. It's a little confusing though, so I might adjust the color of this middle one. Maybe just do a gray. I like that a little bit better. It's not my favorite design ever, but it works. And those are just kind of some basics to get you started. Now, obviously, in my opinion, I am not done. This is kind of a boring card. I also need to erase that middle line. But once I do that, then we'll just pretend that I'm done. How about that? We're going to erase that middle line right now just so I can get it done to show you. So to erase, I'm actually using the brush tool, and I selected, use the eyedropper to select that red, and then we're just going to go right over that fold line because we don't want that fold line to be printed. We want it to just be like this. So I'm going to say File, and then in Photoshop, generally I go to Save a Copy. If I want to save it as a Photoshop or a PDF, I mean, Photoshop PDF is fine. Give it a name, greeting card. I'll click Save, click OK, and then click Save PDF, and yes. And then you can upload that. And then once I see it uploaded, I will double check, make sure everything looks good, and then we will print off a couple copies that you'll then fold. You'll cut out, you'll fold them, and then you're going to donate a couple of those copies to the Bear Creek fundraiser. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask, but that'll hopefully get you started. You know, again, you need your custom brush. It should have type, so typeface is required. Your design signature on the back is required, and saving it as a PDF is also required, not to mention all of those design principles and elements. So if you forgot what those are, you might need to go back to your notes here and double check like the hierarchy, right? And the proximity and the balance, space, alignment. So if I was looking at all of those things in my design here, hierarchy I'd say was working pretty well. I think you noticed the snowman first and then the text below and then probably the border after. So I think that that makes sense for hierarchy. I want the snowman to be noticed first. So keep in mind whatever you want to be noticed first should be larger or more emphasized than everything else. With our balance, I said already it's very symmetrical, which is fine. I want it to be fairly symmetrical. Alignment's very centered. The text is towards the bottom, which I think makes sense, so your eyes kind of visually are pulled down. With proximity, I've already talked about that too. Just with the colors relating to each other, I used gray because I saw a little bit of gray in there, but I could probably use another color if I wanted. But everything relates to each other. All the text relates, the same typeface. I didn't use too many typefaces. That's something to keep in mind too. Proximity has a lot to do with color. So the colors used, I think, all blend relatively well together. Nothing stands out. Nothing feels weird. The feeling of this is that it, it feels like a fairly generic winter holiday card. Space, I definitely, and that relates to white space too. I personally would spend more time on this. This is, in my opinion, this is not a finished card. This would be like bare bones, basic, hey, I produced a card and that's it. Because this took me, 5 minutes to do. It didn't take very long. It went pretty fast, but definitely want to fill in some of those areas. I used image, I used text. I didn't use line a whole lot. I mean, I guess you could kind of say this was a line with the circle. Same with that shape. It's kind of an implied circle, which is fine. Line and shape are one of those where you may or may not use them depending on your design, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, that'll at least get you started, and hopefully will set you up for success for this assignment.